On today's episode of the Nomad Podcast, we're diving into the dream a lot of you have, moving to Spain. But between visas, taxes, bureaucracy, and navigating the infamous mañana culture, it can get complicated fast. So I brought in a pro who's been helping people crack the code for over a decade. Bruno is the co-founder of SpainGuru.es, the go-to resource for everything you need to live, work, and thrive in Spain. He's lived the expat life firsthand, holds 3 passports, speaks 5 languages, and somehow still has the patience to explain Spain's visa system to the rest of us. From non-lucrative visas to digital nomad visas, self-employment options, Beckham Law tax strategies, Bruno and Spain Guru make relocating to Spain doable. If you're dreaming of tapas, sunshine, and that sweet Spanish lifestyle, this episode is your roadmap. This is the Nomad Podcast, and today we're talking to Bruno from SpainGuru.es. Let's dive in.
My goal is I want to interview as many people like you that help people move to different countries.
Okay.
And because the thing is like I used a company in Colombia called Expat Group that helped me get my visa for Colombia, and they made it painless. And I'll mention this when we kind of get into it a little bit more, but just so that because I think it's stupid for people to try it themselves.
To do it themselves.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The bureaucracy and everything. Yeah, that's insane. So, do you know Nomad Capitalist?
Yeah.
I went to Nomad Capitalist Live in September in Malaysia, and his minimum fee is $25,000. But they do everything for you, and they.
I'm not surprised. He seems to be targeting like high net worth individuals, I think.
He is, yeah, and so my thoughts is that people like yourself are the way to go. So I want to kind of catalog all of you guys, whether someone wants to go to Portugal, France, wherever, to make it easy. So I'm going to actually put you on the website too. We're creating a directory on our website that will have that, and you'll actually end up being on a couple of websites with that. So hopefully I'll get you some business. And but yeah. So
I recently ran a poll in one of my Facebook groups, and asking how many people did the visa process themselves for the Spanish non-lucrative visa specifically, and there were like 130 respondents, and 50% of them said that they did it themselves.
Wow.
Versus the other half, so it was really 50-50. Yes.
I can't imagine doing that, because to me, well, I think you'd have to be pretty fluent in Spanish to be able to pull that off.
I mean, I wouldn't personally do it.
I wouldn't.
I'm all the time, like reading about the Spanish non-lucrative visa, and for me, but it depends on the person and your circumstances and the time that you have. But I think it's money well spent. You see,
I
to
do
go
too.
with professionals.
Yeah, because like I am well, first of all, let's kind of get into you. So you are originally from Argentina, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and how long have you been in Spain?
I've been in Spain since 2004, so
Okay.
21 years.
Okay, wow, okay. So yeah, it helped you knowing Spanish already to go there, and I guess was Argentina a former Spanish colony?
Definitely, we speak Spanish there. So, and we are culturally very close to Spain.
But actually, everything I've ever heard is it's almost like there's a heavy Italian influence in Argentina.
It is heavy, but I am actually Italian too.
Okay.
My name is Bruno Bianchi Sarcone. Cannot be more Italian than that. But still, the Italian community is smaller than the Spanish heritage. It is, in the end, a country that was created by the Spaniards. We speak Spanish, and of course, it's a mix of cultures. Buenos Aires itself is like a little New York in that sense. It is, a lot of Jews, a lot of Russians, Koreans, you name it, right? It is a
It's a
melting
melting
pot.
pot. Yeah.
But Spanish culture rules everything in Argentina, in
Okay.
from the cultural perspective.
Okay. So, so what made you pick up and move to Spain?
To be honest, it was out of boredom because I had my I had my Italian passport, so it wasn't even, it wasn't a problem to emigrate to Europe. But back then, I was 20 years old, and that was years 2000. I was studying law, and I wasn't, it wasn't my thing. So I was pretty much bored. I have some money saved, and I won a flight ticket, and I actually found that Spain wasn't, the flight ticket was to Spain, but I wasn't that interested in Spain back in the day, because that's what we were saying, that culturally is very close to Argentina. So I really wanted to see other countries. So I said, I'm gonna go to Scandinavia. So I actually went to Denmark with the plan of staying in Scandinavia for a few years. And in the end, I ended up staying in Denmark for 3 years.
Okay. Wow. And how did you
Studied
like
3 years
Denmark?
in
Because
Denmark.
the language is totally different.
Exactly, that was the point. The point was actually being immersed in a different culture, and actually, I wanted to see a country that, where things worked well, and that was completely the opposite of Argentina in a way. Um, so yeah, I wanted to test living in a Scandinavian country.
But when you left Argentina back then, Argentina was probably probably Argentina and at that time maybe Venezuela were probably the two most functional Spanish countries in Latin America, I would think, because Argentina is rather sophisticated, especially back then, um, compared to like Colombia. Colombia is, I think, has gotten sophisticated in the recent years, but 21 years ago it wasn't. So, so I would think that, well, yeah, and still, I guess Denmark is definitely going to be more. It's Germanic, so so I guess it's going to be more
I mean,
engineering, more efficient at that point.
there's a lot of Argentine people coming to work to Europe, emigrating because they need to. Um, and but I am not one of them. You see, I had the Italian passport. It was seamless to move to Europe. It's easy to, you have the right to live in Europe. And I didn't move for economical reasons. I was okay in Argentina, and I had let's say, a future if I continued to study what I was studying, which was law. And but it wasn't my thing, and I just wanted to take a sabbatical period that ended up me staying in Europe.
But I feel like that whatever you did, however many classes you took in law, probably helped you do what you're doing now because it probably made you grasp the bureaucracy of all of that a little bit better.
I mean, definitely everything you learn doesn't take space in your head, as there's a Spanish saying. But I think moving to Europe when I was 20, what gave me was the skills was basically adapting to anything, right? So in Denmark, I studied actually to be a cook, but I never finished. I never finished the law school. I never finished to be a cook. I studied Danish, and I learned Danish, and I still speak it because I had to use it for studying cook school. Then I moved to Ireland. I learned Italian as well, and I already spoke French because I went to French school when I lived in Argentina. So in the end, I basically learned to adapt and do different jobs. Like being a cook, I worked delivering newspapers. I sold jewelry. I sold stuffing for olives. You name it. Like I did a bunch of things, and yeah, basically I learned how to adapt. And in the end, I started together with some colleagues a startup in Madrid, which is called spotahome.com, and it is a technological platform for renting properties for midterms or for a few months. And I stayed in Madrid for 7 years, and that was a huge success for the Spanish startup ecosystem, at the very least. And now it's present in many cities in Europe. So in the end, the whole experience was adapting and learning different skills and using my, let's say, my languages and so on.
Okay. And your startup was kind of like an Airbnb, wasn't it? Except for more long-term rentals?
Exactly. Actually, people who move to Spain can use it if they, you don't have to visit the property. It's especially powerful for people who are not in the city already, but they want to rent not for only a few days, but for several months. Maybe someone who moves to study, or someone who wants to move to Spain and maybe find a more permanent place, but wants to stay a few months without paying the high price of an Airbnb. So you can use Spot at Home and do the transaction just as the way as you do it in Airbnb with your credit card, and you see videos, you see floor plans, high quality pictures, and landlords on the property are personally verified by the platform. So it is it's a platform designed for that use case.
Okay. Okay. That sounds good. And so then you also, my understanding was you also were involved in something called MAPSA Group.
That's right. That's before I mentioned like selling stuffing for olives, and we, this is Spain. It's the top producer of table olives and olive oil in the world, and I live in Andalusia. Back in the day, we're talking about like 2008, 2009, a huge, you remember this the subprime crisis,
Absolutely.
very hard.
Yeah.
The USA, also Spain. So I said, oh, maybe it's interesting to go to the food sector, because it's a sector that actually resists any kind of crisis. So I decided to leverage my languages skills, my sales skills, and go to the food sector. And here in Malaga, there was this company that sold staffing for olives and have factories, industrial staffing for machines who staff thousands of olives per minute. And we actually ended up opening factories in Greece as well, and in Turkey. So it was pretty interesting experience as well.
Okay. So if by my count, you know 6 languages then.
I used to know six because I used to speak Greek, basic Greek, when I had to go to Greece for the olives, because Greece in the USA, you get the Greek olives, the fantastic huge cannonball olives from Greece. So I had to go there to sell my stuffing, and then also opening the factory there in Greece. So I did speak Greek, but now I can't say I do, because I haven't practiced it in
But
very
I've
long.
got you down with Spanish, of course, which is your native language. We're talking in English. Then you learn Danish. You know Italian and French, and okay, so yeah, okay, so wow, that's a lot of languages.
I mean, it's a means to an end. In the end, what's important, it was what you have to say, right? But definitely, it does help a lot speaking languages, especially for my thing, which is selling.
Yeah, I need to grab a power cord for my camera real quick. I don't know why it's going through batteries fast today. So, so now, tell me what you do at Spain Guru. Like, what do you help people with that?
So Spain Guru is an immigration platform. The focus is on immigration, okay, to Spain, as the name says. Um, so it was started by my wife, who is from Ohio. Um, in 2014, she had to do a lot of immigration paperwork, and she started the platform with a couple of friends, writing blog posts and so on about all the procedures and the Spanish bureaucracy, which is pretty intense. Um, and but it was a side project. Now she has her own company. She has a marketing um, agency, and Spain Guru was there for 3 years ago. I took a Spain Guru in my hands and started running it full time. And now I offer all kinds of services and advice for anything related to Spain. Okay, so you can use Spain Guru for both finding professionals that can help you with immigration advice, with tax advice, um, mortgages, health insurances for Spanish visas, strong translations, postal services in the US, in the UK, and so on. Or you can also use it for if you want to do it yourself. You will still need auxiliary services in order to move to Spain, and all those services and professional services, I personally vet them. I have a community of aggregated 140,000 members with Facebook groups, um, weekly newsletter that I send to about 16,000 members every single week, and a YouTube channel with more than 5,000 followers as of today. So
Okay.
that's Spain Guru.
When plus, you have a ridiculous amount of videos on YouTube. That's I've actually seen. Before I ever set this call up with you. I'd been seeing your videos for a while because I'm considering Spain as an option as well. Um, and it's like you have a lot of great information, and I mean it's a lot of it. It's like I'm like I got to talk to this guy. So yeah, so I think that. The quantity of information you have is really more than what I'm seeing from others on YouTube.
Yeah,
And I
definitely I'm hyperactive about videos. I release one video each working day for the last 2.5 years.
wow.
I have more than 850 videos uploaded. So yeah, by far I think it's the channel creating more amount of content. Of course, they are short. Maybe sometimes it's shorter videos, 2-3 minutes, about specific details. But what I usually do is like I go in depth into, let's say, the hard parts of moving to Spain. I don't talk about the best tapas in Madrid or the best beaches in southern Spain. Sometimes I do speak about that, but what I usually what I try to make it different from others is that I go and I look at the ugly things about moving to Spain, but that you will have to go through them and you will need someone to help you out with that. Right. So people don't come to Spain Guru, let's say, to see beautiful tapas and Spanish dishes. They come to find information that will help them do their moving to Spain more smoothly.
Yeah. Well, and before we started recording, I made the comment to you that I used a service to move to Colombia, and I couldn't imagine doing it. It wasn't the service wasn't expensive, and I couldn't imagine doing that myself because it, basically the time it would have taken me, my time's more valuable than that. And honestly, even if my time wasn't, if my time, I said it was worth, 10 US dollars an hour or 10 euros an hour, which is nothing, it would probably, I'd probably have that's probably what my time would come out to, if not more like $5 an hour because of the time that's involved in doing that. And, all I had to do, they gave me a list of some things they wanted. It didn't take me that long to get that together. I gave it to them. And maybe in about a month and a half, I had my visa. And they asked me like a question in the between where they got a reply back. And it just made it easy. And it was worth the money that I paid. And like I said, it wasn't that expensive. And so my take is I think that doing it yourself is I don't know, I mean, I guess if you've got a lot of time, maybe, but just the bureaucracy and everything, it just seems like it's better to just find somebody that and pay them to do it.
Yeah, but Matt, I think also because you had a great experience with the people that you work with to get your visa, but it is not always like that. I recently ran a poll, March 2nd, and I asked people who use professional help to move to Spain, and I asked them, was it the money worth spent? And 77% of people said yes, it was. But not all of them were actually very happy with the service. So here's where my platform and other platforms come, to help, because we are vetting these services so that you have the experience that you had. Because it could be that if you hire the wrong service, okay, or that doesn't know very well, is not specialized in what you are searching for, you actually end up spending more time or energy or more stress and you are still paying. So yeah, I wanted to point out that it's important to have someone who vets the professionals. You see, and for that, for example, you can enter Trustpilot. You can see we have more than 125 5-star reviews, like 98% of us 5-star reviews. So you are in good hands, right? It's important to have the trust that you are paying for a service that will deliver.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, so I looked at Google reviews for mine, and I looked at like 5 different companies that did this, and they all had some bad remarks, and when I looked at them, some were worse than others, but the one that I used was the best. But I can see where even the company I used, they weren't really good at communicating timelines. Um, they just kind of they took your information, and then you just waited, and you weren't sure if you were waiting, if you were supposed to wait this long. And then, I got a response back in a few weeks, and it said, "Oh, we need this one more piece of information." And that was I would say that if anything, that was their bad part. And it seemed to be what a lot of people were complaining about, is for them as well as others, was just, you know, communicating, telling you like, okay, you need to wait for this amount of time or something. Um, so yeah, I will qualify for a Colombian visa or a Colombian citizenship in about another year, and
Okay.
that will let me move to Spain supposedly under the 2-year thing, even though I'm a U.S. citizen, because that will make me a naturalized Colombian citizen. And
I don't think so. I don't think so, Matt.
okay, so I've been told that by a couple people, and I'm cool if it's not, but
Unfortunately, not.
okay, but
Because
as far as
you are not a Colombian citizen by origin.
okay, so it has to be by origin then.
Yes, you cannot be naturalized. It has to be by origin. For instance, if you're American and you don't have ties to Puerto Rico, for example, Puerto Ricans can also benefit from this. As an American, you can go to Puerto Rico, and after 1 year, you get the certificate of citizenship. But the certificate says that it is by residence, okay,
Okay.
that you obtained it. And then the Spanish authorities see this, and they don't grant you the fast track citizenship for Spain, unfortunately.
Okay. So, but as far as the fast track citizenship goes, it's basically for anybody from a Spanish colony, it's 2 years, correct?
That is correct. That
Okay.
is correct. So
And
it has to be clear. Each of the countries has their own rules when they consider you by origin. For example, Mexican people who are born in the States from Mexican parents, as per the Article 30 of the Mexican Constitution, they are Mexicans by blood, and that makes them Mexican by origin. Therefore, they will benefit, even if they never set foot in Mexico, they benefit from the 2-year fast track for Spain. Right?
wow.
So each
Okay.
country has its own rules on what they consider to be by origin, and Spain looks at those rules individually for each country.
Okay. How many people do you think from former Spanish colonies actually immigrate to Spain every year?
I don't have data on that really, but
Yeah,
it's
that's interesting.
yeah,
That
we
would be
have huge
interesting
communities
topic.
here, like hundreds of thousands of Ecuadorian, Colombians, Venezuelans, Argentines, like you name it, and yeah, every year they come, but um it is let's say a somewhat difficult immigration process. First of all, because they're far away in that sense, so, and it is expensive, okay, to come to Spain. It's not like, for example, African immigration that crosses very quickly, like Moroccans, for example, or Romanians who are now part of European Union. It is much easier for them to come. So it is even there are millions and millions and millions of Ibero-Americans. It's not so easy to cross the ocean to go to Spain. But then once you do it, they do it, and they get legal residence, because you have to be a legal resident in Spain for 2 years. Then you can apply for Spanish citizenship, and your situation is solved.
Okay. And then when someone applies, how long does that usually take?
This is I can tell you the average, but you could be it could be fast or it could be slow. In my case, for example, it took 2 years. Um, Usually it's taking a year, year and a half. It just depends on how much workload the Spanish authorities have in that specific time. Some people I heard was only like 4 to 5 months in 2024, so it's super quick. But you can't count on that, of
Yeah.
course. once you apply.
And then so somebody who is what is your common client? Is it more Americans than British people, or do you find it's just literally all over the world?
So everything in Spenguru is in English. I don't create content in Spanish. So it is focused on non-EU nationals that are English speakers, mostly Americans, also UK, Canadians, Australians, a lot of Filipinos. Filipinos also benefit from the 2-year fast track because they have cultural ties to Spain, but they don't speak Spanish. So a lot of Filipinos go to Spain Guru. I think my most watched video is about Spanish citizenship for Filipinos, in fact, in the YouTube channel. So yes, you have to be an English speaker to use Spain Guru because everything is in English.
Okay. So and was that because when your wife being from Ohio that for her starting, or is that just the choice that you both made to do this?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, at home we speak English. My two daughters, I speak to them in English. We live in Malaga, and they're gonna learn Spanish. They both speak Spanish already, so it's not an issue. But everything is in English, and Spenguru's content was created in English from the beginning. It was focused especially in Americans, but then slowly I started to expand it to other English speakers like the UK, who are very, very important group. Of course, they are non-Europeans anymore, so they need the same services as the Americans need to move to Spain. So definitely, this is the reason why the content is in English.
Okay. Yeah, and I've heard a lot of British people are moving to Spain. Any idea why that is? Is it for the weather? Because the weather's so
There's a lot of content.
yeah.
There's a lot of immigration content in Spanish. Sorry, to complete the answer. There's a lot of, let's say, competition in Spanish about immigration to Spain.
Okay.
A lot. Okay, there are huge platforms and many lawyers. They also deal with other types of immigration procedures like asylum, for example. This is something that I don't really speak too much about. You see, like asylum or arraigos for irregular people or people who have not a legal status in Spain. There's a lot of volume of work there, but I tend to focus more in the solutions for American, UK, Canadian expats moving to Spain, like Spanish non-lucrative visa, digital nomad visa, work permits, citizenship for dual citizens, or et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Now, but Spain doesn't allow dual citizenship, do they?
Yes, they allowed in certain
Okay.
circumstances.
Okay.
But yes, if you're an American, typically if you're an American, they will ask you to renounce the citizenship, but they don't enforce this. And
Okay.
people
I've heard
keep
that.
double passports.
Okay. Have you ever heard anybody having any issues over that later down the road? Because I've heard
No, I never heard of
they're
it.
not-
And also, renouncing American citizenship is not an easy process, neither cheap.
Yeah, I know.
And
Yeah, they
you
have
know,
an
you
exit time.
you gotta go to the consulate, interview with someone at the American consulate. You need to pay, I think, about $3,000 to renounce, and it's not something easy.
Well, it can even be more than that because they look at I don't know the total everything on this, but they look at basically your tax situation. And I think I've heard different things, but I've heard that they look at how much taxes they're going to lose from you in the next couple of years, and they just go ahead and charge it to you in that moment. And so I don't know how true that is, but I've heard that from 2 or 3 different places. So, so yeah, it sounds like it's brutal to renounce your U.S. citizenship, but so that being said, for say an American that wants to come to Spain I know has the Beckham Law, and my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my understanding is it's like a flat 24 or 25% tax on anything you make in Spain. But if you don't make your money from Spain, it's 0% tax. Is that correct?
I believe so. I'm not a tax advisor.
Okay.
First of all, in order to be eligible, you need to move. 99% of cases, you need to be an employee. That would be a W-2
Okay.
in the US. not as a freelancer, not as a 1099 contractor.
Okay.
If you're a contractor, which is like most of people under the digital nomad visa lately for remote work, would move as contractors, not as W-2. So that would make them not eligible for Beckham Law. So usually it's for someone who works for a company that needs to be moved to Spain and works as an employee. Okay, so first of all, that eligibility. Then it has, once you apply and you're eligible, you have 24% flat rate. I understand for Spanish income. You don't pay taxes on your worldwide income. You don't have to disclose your overseas assets. So if you have a mansion elsewhere in Spain, outside of Spain, you won't need to disclose that value for wealth tax purposes, because as you probably know, Spain still has wealth tax, one of the few countries that has that that tax. So yeah, it has definitely some a lot of pros. What tax advisor said is you need to at least be making around 55,000 euros per year income, so that it makes sense to go through this special tax regime, because there are administrative burdens and costs, etc. And it doesn't make too much sense if you make less than that per year to go through this special tax regime for several reasons.
Okay. And so, and you said you're in Malaga. So, and I have not been to Malaga. I've been to lots of parts of Spain, but if I'm not mistaken, Malaga's south of Valencia, isn't it?
That's right. We're in front of Africa.
Okay. And but what I've been hearing for the past 2 or 3 years, I've been hearing a lot about Malaga. Like, I hear that, like, I've heard that Madrid is the number one place for expats to come to, but I'm hearing like Malaga is now like number 2 or 3. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely. Malaga is became very famous lately. Madrid, definitely by absolute numbers, is the place where most Americans live. I think it's 12,000 registered Americans. Um, of course, a lot of them have dual citizenship, but they don't register as Americans. So these numbers are more or less, ballpark figure. So Madrid is the top place in absolute terms. But also Madrid is very, very big, very, very big. So 12,000 people in a 7 million city is not too many, really. Most Americans and expats in general tend to concentrate on the Mediterranean coast from Barcelona to Malaga. And yes, you have Barcelona, Valencia, Malaga, and Madrid. Those are the top destinations in Spain.
And Barcelona, I know, has been protesting against tourists. I would almost imagine that they probably think of expats the same as tourists, maybe, because it sounds like it's probably all combined as part of their problem of housing. So, yeah, Barcelona. I love Barcelona, but and I love Madrid. And I really enjoyed Valencia as well. So I'm sure Malaga is incredible. The coastal places, yeah, I've enjoyed the seafood along the coastline of Spain. So as far as services, so you said you help people if they even need to find so you help them find lawyers. So anybody wanting to move their business there, you have all the tools to help with that as well, correct?
That's
Okay.
right. That's right. Regardless, depending on your situation, how you want to move to Spain, there's always solutions. And
Okay.
I have a professional. I don't do the process myself. I just recommend the best professionals in each field that I have personally vetted for years. I would say like 9 of 10 of the partners that I recommend on Spain Guru have been on the platform minimum at least 1 or 2 years. And the most important ones, lawyers and tax advisors, I have been working them for several years. So they stood the test of time and trust and about knowledge. So yeah, definitely you can move your business. You can come as a retiree, as a digital nomad if you work remotely for a non-Spanish company, or if you have a job offer from Spain, or if you take a sabbatical year and plan to open a business. Maybe all those solutions exist definitely, and on Spain Guru you can find all the related services for that.
Okay. So, and how does someone get up with you? Do they just go straight through SpainGuru.com?
It's spenguru.es.
Yes, I'm sorry, SpainGuru.es. I apologize.
No worries.
But yes, so
I
basically,
should say spenguru.com, but I think it's like a few €1,000 already, and it doesn't make too much sense right now for SEO purposes
yeah.
to do that investment. But yeah, definitely you can go on spenguru.es. But I think the strongest part of Spenguru is the community. Okay, as I said, I have more than 10 Facebook groups. The top group is Spanish Immigration. Spenguru.es is 36,000 members, super active group for general immigration procedures and tax and anything related to Spain. But also you have dedicated non-lucrative visa group with 20,000 members, the biggest group out there. Digital Nomad Visa group, 15,000 members, and many other groups like expats moving to Spain, etc., etc. And there you can not only, let's say, ask me and professionals or read, blog posts, but also ask people who are in Spain or planning to move to Spain who are in the same situation as you, and also benefit from that experience, from that feedback, right?
Okay. So that's nice to, because actually getting to listen to somebody who's gone through the process versus necessarily just a consultant that's a nice additional feedback. Hearing that straight from the horse's mouth of somebody who's done that. So yeah, that's
Exactly. Sometimes the communication is unidirectional. Yes, you read a blog post from some lawyer who is telling you something, but you cannot answer or get feedback from that, right? So in
right.
Spenguru, you have both things. I do the investigation, I do the webinars, I write the content, I create the videos and everything, but I also have a huge community out there where I also feed part of my content with new and fresh information because things are changing all the time. There's so many differences between the different consulates. For example, it's not the same if you apply for a visa in Los Angeles than if you do it in New York. It's absolutely different experience and different requirements, okay, and different timings. So really, you need to I highly, highly recommend not only going with professional help, but also join a community and ask other people who are going through it or having gone through it.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like good information. And and I've been through your website, and I again, there's so not only do you have all the videos on YouTube, the content, the quantity of content you have is really incredible. So yeah, it was like when I ran across you originally. And then when I decided to start doing the podcast, I'm like, okay, I created my short list, and you were on my first 10 that I of the people I wanted to talk to, because I'm like, okay, this guy's got just so much information, and I'm
Oh,
shocked that
if you decide to move to Spain, I want to interview you.
absolutely. Well, there's a good chance that may happen end of the year, beginning of next year. For me, it's like I've got to live up to that 183-day tax window so I can claim it as my tax residence from the U.S. Because the U.S. we're the only country in the world that with citizenship-based taxes, so they follow us wherever. So
And
yeah,
although you're very interested about taxes, and especially you know, uh, let's say avoiding taxes when you don't have to pay them, because a lot of time, a lot of people pay taxes even if they don't have to. It's not an ethical question. It's a matter that if it's not part of the requirements that you pay taxes. One very well kept secret here is that under the non-lucrative visa, people think that they need to become tax residents in Spain in order to renew it. You don't have to. You can come and retire to Spain. Of course, you cannot spend 183 days in Spain, but you can spend 182
okay.
and still be able to renew this visa. Okay.
Oh, wow. So it doesn't have a what is there a time and country limit on that visa?
The thing is, I mean, just for the purpose of renewing the visa or the non-lucrative residence, there was a requirement of spending 180 days in the previous regulation.
Okay.
There was a court ruling saying, a Supreme Court ruling saying that this cannot be included in this regulation. It has to be included in a higher hierarchy law because it's an important right, the right of freedom of movement. So they had to delete that requirement. But now the Congress passed a new regulation saying, oh, now you will have to, in order to renew your non-lucrative residence, to spend at least 183 days in Spain if you want to renew. This is aligning with tax residency conditions in Spain. But since there is this Supreme Court ruling saying that this cannot be included in the regulation, we are still in the same situation. So that requirement won't be enforceable. You see? So there's a lot of confusion because the Congress wants one thing, but really the Supreme Court says you cannot do it this way. You see?
Okay.
So really, people will be able to stay in Spain 182 days with the non-lucrative visas and be able to renew. Another story is if you want to get then the permanent residence, you need to stay more time in Spain and fulfill those requirements if you want to get the permanent residence, or if you want to obtain the Spanish passport. But that's a different, let's say, long-term strategy that you need to think about, and then you will have to spend time in Spain. But if your only purpose is to not become a tax resident in Spain and retire in Spain, and you're happy with staying 182 days in Spain, you can do it.
Okay. So, one of the other things that, to me, so I'm definitely interested in taxes, but I'm also interested in quality of life, and that's the thing I notice. The United States has really dropped since I was a kid. When I was a kid, the United States was basically in the top 5 on anything, on any index, and this was in the 80s. And now it's fallen on all of those counts. And like quality of life, Spain's quality of life and healthcare are ranked quite a bit higher. Like significantly higher. Even the passport's better. Last year, I think the passport was number 1 or number 2, and this year I think it's fallen to number 3 just because somebody bumped it. But like healthcare, I know you have to have healthcare to come to for your visa in Spain, and it's like, isn't it like $50 or $60 for a person per month?
Definitely, like as a non-EU nationals, except you are a UK retiree, you have other options, the special case. But otherwise, American, Canadians, Australians, you need to have a private health insurance that offers you full coverage in Spain and with no co-payments. Basically, you have to mimic what you obtain from the public healthcare sector. The thing is that, as you say, it is super cheap compared to the usual American health insurance, but it will depend on your situation. It's not the same as if you are fit and young like you, Matt, than if you are
Thank you for the young part.
than if you are older, like you're nearing your, you're 75 years old and you have pre-existing conditions, then you will pay, of course, more, but still it will be a fraction of what you are used to pay in the States. And also, after 1 year of residence in Spain, you have the option to pay your access into the public healthcare system and access, as I said, the public healthcare system that will also cover your pre-existing conditions. Okay, so the best of both worlds is to have the public healthcare access and the private health insurance, which is something I do because they both have pros and cons. So
Okay. Yeah, like healthcare for someone like me in the US is basically maybe just under $300 a month to maybe 300, maybe even a little over 300. And it's like, it's ridiculous because we still have copays on that. And then in addition to that, you're going to get a bill after you go see a doctor for whatever insurance didn't cover, which is usually, quite a bit more. So, healthcare in the US has just gotten ridiculous. And yeah, but me being out of the country for a few years, I've got to actually see healthcare work outside the US, and it's more efficient. And of course, I don't know how the efficiency is in Spain, but the things I've heard and then I've seen the healthcare rankings, and we'll end up putting them on the screen for a comparison. But yeah, it's when I saw the cost, because I just assumed that Spain, being an European country, would be even higher than the U.S. because I think that's everybody in the U.S.'s mentality that things cost more. But like even when I was in Spain this past year for a couple months, and I was impressed with you have Lidl's and Aldi's, which are German-based grocery store, but that every American knows about as well. But those are so much cheaper than Lidl and Aldi in the U.S. And then you have, I think it was called MD. You had a couple of your own Spanish clones, I guess, of the low-cost stores. And you could go in and buy a bottle of wine for €2. And and of course olives. Olives are like even in Madrid, there's this. I can't remember the name of the market, but it was this market, and they had all of it's like a food market, and
Right,
lots
South Olive City. That's the most famous market for in Madrid, I think, San Miguel.
it was, and they had olives that were fantastic, and yeah, I really uh enjoyed that time in Spain, and enjoyed and more importantly, um I can tell you that groceries, things like that were, gasoline obviously is more in anywhere in Europe, but groceries, I think you could live less in Spain than you could in the United States.
This is what people say. One of the videos I have is it true that you pay higher taxes in Spain than in the US? And the beginning is, yes, absolutely, yes. But that's not the question you want to answer. The question you want to answer is, if I move to Spain, am I gonna be paying more at the end of the year? Because if you put into the calculation, you factor in the cost of life. People did this calculation and they said, I'm spending 24% less in Spain than in the US. It's true, I pay more taxes for whatever situation I have, but the cost of life, healthcare, transportation, I don't have to take the car everywhere. I use public transportation, groceries is cheaper, etc. And the end of the year, I'd made a 24% difference cheaper than in the US. And of course, it's not the same that if you live in Manhattan than if you live in Akron, Ohio, where my wife is from, right? It's different. Of course, this is a general average, but in general, it's gonna be cheaper life even if the taxes are higher.
Yeah. Well, Americans have the downfall of not understanding their comparison on taxes, because most Americans will actually only think about, when they're thinking about taxes and doing that comparison, they think about their federal tax rate. But there's a lot more to taxes than that in the U.S., and that they're paying that they don't include in the calculation. So in the U.S., you pay Social Security, which is 7.65%, and your employer matches that. So if you're a self-employed individual, like a lot of these people who are digital nomads, they have to pay both sides of that because they are the employer and the employee. If they're 1099, you are automatically the employer and the employee. So you pay 15.3 on top of your federal rate. Now you also have to pay a state tax, and that's different per state. So obviously New York and California, I think, is the absolute worst, I think. I lived in North Carolina, so North Carolina is, I think, 8 or 10%. But you got that on top of your federal tax rate. So by the time you add all those up, I'm not so sure that taxes are more anywhere in Europe. Norway and Switzerland, I think, have the two highest tax rates in Europe, and I'm not even sure when you do the math. I mean, if you're lower on that federal scale, they may be more expensive, but I still don't think Spain. I think that's a video that you and I need to do the research and do another video on that, because I bet Spain beats out.
And there is difficult calculation, and also it's hard to come to a conclusion because it depends so much on your specific circumstances.
It does.
it's you really need to do a study for your own situation to understand in the end how much money you have at the end of a year. Because, for example, I prefer to pay, let's say, 50% tax, but I make $1 million a year, and then I get 500K clean net, than paying 10% tax on €1,000 per year.
Yeah.
Right? I'm gonna end up with €900 at the end of a year. Stupid, ridiculous comparison, but in the end, you have to see the absolute calculation results. Yes,
Yeah.
and also, we were mentioning before, it is not only about taxes and everything. It is the quality of life, having slower pace of life, maybe living next to the coast, having better food, maybe more available, or
Well, there's some interesting things on that because there's a lot of like chemicals that go into foods in the U.S. that are illegal in the European Union. So um, so things like that, and then the quality of life. If you're familiar with the happiness index, Spain ranks higher on the happiness index than the U.S. Because those things matter. I mean, longevity. Longevity is related to happiness and quality of life, and it's like, um, who wants to die at 70 if they can live to be 90? So I think there's more to it than well, and not paying high taxes or something, or a lot at the end of the year is probably helps with the happiness. But yeah, the Spain the thing I noticed about Spain, I've been to Spain several times, and but I paid more attention this past year to the people. The pace is a little slower than in the U.S. We live to work, and in Spain they work to live, and there's a difference in that mentality.
absolutely, yes, it is. It is hard sometimes to let's say, get used to it. I know a lot of Americans, as you imagine, not only through Spain Guru, but because of my wife. I have American friends, and we spend a lot of time. And I can see a lot the difference from Americans who just arrived to Spain and Americans who have been in Spain for a year or two. Is almost two different people. Let's say it will transform you in the good sense. Uh, some people say in Spain there is no customer service. Absolutely zero, right? It's zero. And compared to the US, I used to think the same, but when I go to the US and, for example, I sit down in a restaurant and I finish my meal, they put my bill 1 second after I finish. They take the plate off, the bill is there waiting, and asking for a 25% tip. You see? And is that good customer service? This is the thing that after spending some time in Spain, you will be thinking. And now, for example, if I ask my wife, she went through all this process and she laughs about it because she's like, man, service is better in Spain. Overall, it's better because of the whole experience. It's not only how fast it is, etc. But in the end, I like it more here, she says.
Yeah.
Oh,
I would say the same when I was there, and I was all over Europe I was in Europe for 3 months this past year, and like I said, I've been in Europe every year for the past 20 some years, different countries, but Europe in general, they like that food culture that you just mentioned at restaurants. Uh, I abhor that in the U.S. And of course there are things I like about the U.S. that I miss here and that are different. That I think there's pros and cons to any place, but dining, I think just Europe as a whole wins. Like when I was in Spain, you would be at a restaurant, you have to ask for the bill. But they're going to let you tie up that table as long as you want to sit there, and they because they're getting paid. They're not relying on their tips. And the tipping culture is, I've heard all over the place. I've heard you can do zero, or you can add just a euro or two, rounding up. What is the tipping culture that from your experience in Spain?
I always try to. I think I have to write a blog post about it because it's hard to summarize. Depends on the situation. It depends on how much you spend. It depends on the place where you are. But as you said, generally there is not an expectation that the tip is part of the salary of the waiter.
Yeah.
There's not that. Um, I remember once my dad was visiting here and from Argentina, and he's used to when he travels, he tips 10%, 15%, whatever the norm is in the place. And we went here to the bar on the corner. They usually have the menú del día, which is the daily menu. You can choose and usually it's around 10 euros. Okay, you can have two dishes and dessert and everything. You never tip when you go for the menú del día because this is meant to be for workers around the area, who won't tip for this. You're not going for an experience in a restaurant or anything. My dad, he tipped. He put there like a 2 euros tip, and in the bar owner was like, "Whoa!" He said, "This should be an example for everyone. Listen, look at this."
Yeah, and it's
Silly.
that's the thing I'm always worried about, like with Americans when they come to other countries. It's like don't don't push your culture on them because it messes it up for the local people. If they start yeah, because like the tipping culture here in Colombia is about 8%, but it's included on your bill already. And they even ask you, they say, "Hey, is it okay for the servicio to be on there?" And you just say, "Yeah," because most of the time you get good service, but they'll take it off if you say no. And so theirs is more 8% or nothing. And I'm like, I mean, I don't know. I just of course, everything here is inexpensive. So you can go to a restaurant. I was at a restaurant with 3 people the other day, like a steak restaurant, and you would have liked it being from Argentina. It's a good steakhouse here because most of the steaks in Colombia are no comparison to Argentina. And I think the bill was for 3 people with each with a cocktail was like 40, maybe $45. Um, so steak, cocktail. So we'll call that 50 euros
I'm
basically.
gonna move to Colombia. I won't do the price in Spain.
Oh, I know it won't be the price in Spain. So, yeah, the restaurants in Spain were not necessarily. I still don't think that. I still don't feel like I paid more. I think I still paid less in Spain than I did in the U.S. Maybe it's just because of not having to tip 20%. Um, the thing I noticed about Spain was like I said, the groceries. I felt like the groceries were a lot cheaper. Restaurants probably were fairly on par with the U.S. And now the housing, I've heard, housing, I guess, depending on where you're at, could be more maybe. And like I've heard housing is expensive in Madrid and even in the inner city of like Valencia or someplace. So in Barcelona.
I mean, the same differences of location like happens in the U.S. It's not the same buying in central Los Angeles, or versus I don't know Oklahoma,
Yeah.
to say something. The same happens here. Everyone wants to. There's a high demand in the coast, high demand in Madrid, but there are neighborhood differences. So you need to be very granular. I think one of the biggest differences between Spain and the U.S. in terms of real estate is the lack of transparency that there is in Spain. In the US, you have platforms like Zillow, for example, that have their Zestimate. You can see
Yeah.
the prices of the houses. You have all the history. You have, how much they pay the HOA in the communities. Like you have so much data, right? And you even have the scores of the schools around each of the properties. Like I was in your real estate, as you can see, and I was looking at those platforms, and it's just like amazing what you have in the States. You come to Spain, realtors are not licensed. It is a fully unregulated. Like right now, Max, you can come to Spain and start working as a realtor right now, this afternoon, if you want. Okay.
Okay.
And you can sell a property and charge a commission and whatever commission you want to charge. And there's absolutely no regulation or exams about it. So and the incentive chain is different, because here the sellers pay the commission of the realtor, the landlords pay the commission of the rental. So really, when you are trying to rent, when you're trying to buy, they're not working for you. Also, there's no MLS system. You arrive to a city and you want to see all the inventory in one place. This is fantastic about the States. You move your family and say, like, I want a single family home for a family of four. Uh, and they show you all the properties, and between the realtors, they talk to each other and they share their commissions and finish. But you have access to all that inventory. In Spain, you arrive, you have the same ad by different agencies. One agency charges you 5% plus VAT, another one charges you 3%. The other one doesn't charge you but puts a higher price in the property. You see, uh, and each of the different realtors, they don't have all the inventory in the area. They have to get the inventory to sell or to rent. Yes, they have to convince the landlords and the owners to sell their properties or rent them through them, so they can add them in the inventory. So it's a different, very different way to work, and I think it's a challenge for people moving here.
Yeah, that's the same here as Colombia. Everything you described is exactly the same. You can go see a property that has three different prices because three different real estate agents are selling it, and each one is charging. Yeah, I have a real estate license in North Carolina that I still maintain. So I do my continuing education remotely to keep the license active, as I've had it for, I don't know, maybe 25 years. Um, so I recognize those things. Yeah, I just assume I made the assumption that Spain was regulated, because I just figured, Europe is more regulated than a lot of other places. But that's interesting to hear. So basically, that's something that people need to navigate then when they are coming to Spain, is kind of know. I guess that's where your platform probably comes in handy as well, because you've vetted out some people for that.
For real
There's-
estate, I only recommend mortgage brokers.
Okay.
Yes, that I have fully vetted. I have been working with them for years, but I don't have a network of realtors because of everything I told you.
Okay.
You see, I've been in real estate for many years. Here in Spain, I bought and sold properties and rented many times. So not only as a professional, but also my personal experience. And so far, I haven't had the enough trust to recommend anyone. Also, because it's not because people want to do a bad job, but it's just also because you don't have control over the whole chain of the
Yeah.
process. You see, when you are selling a property as a realtor, you have to deal with the owner. You see, and maybe the owner is missing some paperwork, they didn't finish the inheritance process, they maybe didn't disclose a secret about this property, etc., etc. And then the problems arise, and it was not the fault of the realtor, let's say. Yes, and there is no tools, let's say, to do a proper investigation about the whole situation of a property. You see, so it is the whole system that could be improved in different points of the
Okay.
process.
Well, it's kind of like what we talked about earlier. There's pros and cons to everywhere. There's going to be things that the United States is going to be better on than Spain, and vice versa. Or Canada is going to be better. It's like there. I don't think there's really any perfect place on Earth, but there might be the perfect place for you. Um, and I think that's what people have to figure out, is what is their perfect place that makes them the happiest. And so yeah. So for all the years I've gone to Europe, I don't know. There's just something to me. There's something special about Europe, because I mean, like, it's just the cultures, and of course the architecture and stuff. And of course, I've stayed. There's a hotel that I've gotten to know the owners over the years from staying there, but it's actually in Germany. It's in a place called Braunfels, and which is maybe 45 minutes north of Frankfurt. And there's a castle next to it, and this the hotel is 600 years old. There's nothing in the U.S. that's 600 years old, and I don't know. To me, and the hotel's not like incredible. It's like it's got a really low pile carpet that's old. It's just the fact of being able to stay in something that old, and there's just so much history, and it's like the thing and that's the other thing I love about Europe in general is you are a 1 or 2 hour plane ride, at anywhere from 15 to 60 euros on an EasyJet or Ryanair, from another culture, and so there's France has a different culture than Spain, Italy, Germany. It's to me, it's like all of that is what makes whether you're picking Spain or another European country, that's just what makes all of those European countries fantastic. So, and then you do have good connectivity, like with Madrid and Valencia, and I'm assuming Malaga because of
Well, Malaga is incredible. We have high-speed train. It links you to Madrid in 3 hours or less, 2.5 hours, and you can go to Madrid for less than 40 euros in a high-speed train. And usually, if you go for cheap flights and you have flexibility, the cost of the flight will be cheaper than the taxi that brings you to the airport. For example, I went to Morocco last year for less than 20 euros per trip. I went to Romania. By the way, fantastic castles and nature, and for 35 euros return trip, and it's like a 3.5 hour flight.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that Romania, because my cheapest flight in my whole life was Bucharest, Romania to Berlin, Germany, 11 euros on Ryanair.
Exactly. Ryanair is fantastic. Ryanair is fantastic.
Yeah. So
A lot of people are against Ryanair because they charge you for the hand luggage and all this and that. But in the end,
it's still
it's unbeatable. Those guys are unbeatable.
Yeah.
They are the best.
Yeah.
And everybody follows them. They are the pioneers. They're changing the industry.
Well, you've also got, you have EasyJet too, and then there's some others like there's Eurowings, I think.
Here in Spain, we have Vueling, for example. Vueling. Now I'm going to Barcelona, and Barcelona, from Malaga can be like 30 euros, something like that. Yes, you have several low cost, and many of the traditional flagship lines had developed their low cost spin. How you say it?
Yeah, spin-off. Yeah, spin-off. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I've done that with there was a flight. I can't remember what the name of the airline was supposed to be. Transavia maybe, or something like that. But I was supposed to be flying from Paris to Naples, Italy, and when we were boarding the plane, it was an Air France plane, and so I had to look it up, and I'm like, oh, okay, they're owned by Air France, and they had to swap out planes. The Transavia or whatever it was, there was something wrong with the plane or needed maintenance or something, so they just brought in an Air France plane, and that's what we did the flight on. But that was a cheap flight. I don't know. I think it was like 60 euros. But still, but you can't be that in the U.S. In the U.S., everything's at least 100 and probably more like 200 or 300. So, yeah, that's to me these are all the things that make or the train system. Like, we do not have a train system in the U.S. You can say we do with Amtrak, but that's not a train system. And so, yeah, the train system throughout Europe is definitely incredible. And of course, Spain. I'd even heard like. Someone had told me how much the metro was in, I can't remember, I don't think it was Madrid, I think it was in Valencia. And it might have been Barcelona, but it was like they had to ride the metro for the month. It ended up coming out to like, I don't know, maybe €1 a day or something. It was not very expensive. It was ridiculously cheap. And I'm like, that's incredible.
Very cheap. But on the other hand, for example, in the USA, when you are in the USA and you're driving your car, there's something that never comes into your mind, which is, where am I going to park my car when I arrive?
That's true. That is true.
And in Spain, this is like the top priority. when you say like, oh, I have to drive somewhere, it's like, where am I gonna put it? And sometimes you have to leave it like literally 10 blocks away,
Yeah.
right? Because there's nowhere, and the cities and the government, they are going against, the policies are going against having a car. Yes.
Yeah.
Uh, and reducing the space, reducing the parking lots, making more pedestrian streets. I'm sure for the good, okay?
Yeah.
But it's going to be a change, a big change for someone who is very reliable. And a lot of American people are asking, like, should I bring my car to Europe? Or how did you bring your car? And I would tell you, like, already, that car doesn't fit in my parking lot. Can't
Yeah,
even
so
fit into the street where I live.
well, that being said, do you help people? Does your website do you have vetted people or helping people bring their car?
I have articles about it where the community recommended different ones, different cargo companies with different, but I don't have right now any partnership with any of them.
Okay. What about like shipping containers just for people's belongings where they want to bring their furniture or whatever?
I have a partnership with one top service that has like, I think, 4.8 with 20,000 reviews on Trustpilot. It's called Send My Bag, and you have a discount of 5% if you go through Spenguru. And this is a top rated, but it's for bags, for boxes, smaller things. If you plan to bring a full container, that makes sense. If you plan to move a lot of belongings, including cars and everything, then there are cargo companies out there that people mention in the community of Spenguru. But I have not worked on a partnership with any of them or obtain any discount. I could not yet obtain any discount for the community, because when I offer this kind of service, I usually try to negotiate also a discount, not only a kickback for Spenguru, but also a discount for the community, and I haven't been successful so far. But yeah, there are a few cargo companies out there. For example, one that resonates to me is called Schumacher, and a lot of people spoke well about them. But it's not the only one. There are a few more that provide a good service.
Well, and interestingly enough, I've in all the years I've been going to Europe, occasionally I would see a car with a U.S. license plate in different countries, and I would, if I got a chance to talk to them, I would ask them, and they say, "Yeah, you can bring your car over, and you don't have to register it for, you register it when you bring it in, but you can keep the U.S. license plate for like I think it's 6 months." And I was like, "Wow, that's because you can't bring a car from Europe with the EU license plate to US. You gotta, in fact, you can't even import your car unless it's a car that is actually sold in the US or it's a classic. It's 25 years or older. But yet Europe will let you bring a car from the US. I don't know if there's some additional restrictions, but I've seen several cars.
Well, you have also to obtain the driving license after 6 months.
Yeah. And
For
that,
the first 6 months, you will need an international driving license. If you want to rent cars, many car rental companies will require you an international driving license together with your valid American license. But then afterwards, you will have to go through the theoretical and the practical exams in Spain and get a Spanish driving license.
well, and that being said, the international driver's license, Spain is one of the few countries in Europe that requires that. If I go rent a car in Germany, they don't require that, but Spain always requires that. And all it is, if anybody doesn't know what that is you go to AAA, to a AAA office, and they'll basically, it's just a translation of your license, and it's like, I don't know. I think the last time I paid $15, maybe $20 for it, and it's valid for a year. But yeah, someone told me if I was going to go to Spain, they told me I should get my license in Colombia, because they said that if you come from a former Spanish colony and you already have your driver's license there, they'll just
Not
transfer it.
not all the countries. For example, Mexico is the same case as the States, because in the States it's a state-based document, the driving license. And that's the problem. In Mexico, it's the same. It's the United States of Mexico, in fact, the official name. And the driving license is also by state in Mexico. So there is no agreement for the exchange.
Okay.
right? So it doesn't have to be, there could be an agreement even with a non-Latin country to exchange the driver's license, right? For example, the UK, because of previously being European Union, etc. So really, you have to check that the exchange process exists, because it's gonna be so much better, faster, easier, and cheaper. You're gonna only spend 35 euros, and you're gonna be able to exchange your driving license, like I did with my Argentine one, and I never had to pass any test or anything. Just a medical test that the doctor looks at you, counts that you have two arms, two legs, and you can see something with your glasses, and that's it.
So your wife, for example, because I've heard that the licensing process is a lot more difficult, and not just in Spain, but all over Europe. That they're just more critical. I have a commercial pilot's license in the U.S., and if I ever wanted to fly a European registered plane, I would need to convert that to, I think it's called JAA instead of where we're the FAA in the U.S. And they have heard that it would require me to go additional schooling. So my understanding is that Europe is just a little bit more and more intensive on making sure that you know how to drive better, or you know how to fly better. So your wife, when she did hers, did she ever give you feedback on
He
the
didn't.
process? Was it brutal?
She didn't.
She did?
She's actually doing it right. She's actually doing it right now. Right now, as we speak.
So how has she given you feedback on like what the process is compared to what she did when she was probably 16 years old in the US?
Well, first of all, I asked her to write a blog post once she's done with it, because she's not.
Okay.
She's just doing the theoretical, let's say, classes to pass the theoretical exam, and then you have to do your practice exam. Okay. But first of all, in USA, what I notice is that everyone drives,
Yeah.
because if you don't, you just can't do a normal life.
No.
You cannot go for groceries. You cannot go to school. You cannot go anywhere. So I think that in the US, they are much more flexible to who they give the driving license. And I've been driving in the States many times, and I saw things that were surprising in terms of, like, accidents and stuff like that. So I don't want to generalize, but this is my theory that, for example, grandparents that are 85 years old are still driving in the States. And if they drive well, it's fine that they are, but many times no. And they still are doing, they're almost blind. Okay. This is a specific cases that I met that in Spain they wouldn't be on the road. Okay. Um, so as I said, I don't say it's bad or wrong. It's just here, um, there is a higher bar to get the driving license. Okay. And I notice it when I drive. And I notice it when I drive in Spain and in Europe in general versus the US. So also another thing, the cars in the US, most of them, they have automatic gear.
Yeah.
And people don't know how to use the
manual.
the manual. They don't know. You just don't know it. So, you cannot, sometimes there's no cars to rent with automatic. Sometimes, a friend won't be able to loan you one car, because you don't know how to drive it, basically, because of the gear problem.
Yeah.
Yes. So people come here and they need to relearn in their adult years how to use the gears, for example, because 95% of cars here are with manual gear.
Yeah.
Right? So, and then you have to pass the exam usually with manual gear, because you want to have access to a bigger pool of cars, right? In my case, my car has manual gear. My wife has to learn how to use the manual gear. She knows how to, but she's not like me, that I have been driving with manual gear since I was 17.
Yeah.
Many schools, they have their English classes, but they say that the translations are even more misleading than actually, if you speak a little bit Spanish, you're gonna understand better the Spanish version and class, and it's gonna be cheaper too. So
Okay.
there's all those things that come into play. There are a few towns, for example, in Spain, that are known because they give you very easy driving permits, especially famous among people who haven't passed the test 3-4 times. So they literally spend the summer in those little towns in Spain because the town is just one road with one traffic light, and it's impossible that they don't give you the driving license.
Do you have a list of those on your website?
One is here in Granada province, and it's called Baza. And you go to Baza, it's a small town. There's just the only thing different is like it's full of car academies.
This needs to be your next blog post.
Yes, and the people who have not passed, because it's expensive in the end. If you don't pass the exam, you have to pay for the exam. I think it's 40 euros or 100 euros. You have to pay for your practice classes, with someone driving next to you. It cannot be your friend teaching you. As far as I understand, in Argentina, my friend taught me how to drive. Okay, and my father.
Yeah, my father and my mother taught me how to drive when I was a kid.
Here you can do it, but you have to do it hiding, because really you need to have a proper instructor next to you, because you are a liability, you're a risk on the road if you don't have the driving license. So all those regulations come into play, and there is the cost of not passing the exam, and also the demotivation. You become a bit demotivated if you don't pass the exams a couple of times. It can be hard.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, even the same is true from what I understand with the, I can fly a U.S. registered airplane anywhere in the world because the registration matches my my license. But if I wanted to fly, a Spain registered, some other European registered, I'm supposed to have that that license, and apparently it's like an extra 30 or 40% of flight hours in training than it is for the U.S. And likewise, the U.S. does not accept the Colombian. Anybody who's from Colombia that has a pilot's license, the U.S. says, you need more time. You don't meet our requirements. But my understanding is Europe says, okay, you might be a good pilot, but not good enough. So they're on the same
Times in
car.
politics.
Yeah.
Many times in politics and agreements. For example, I don't know now, but Spanish ham is the best in the world, in my opinion.
Huh.
Cannot be
Now you gotta
exported
try
to the
that.
States. It cannot be exported to the States because the FDA says whatever.
Yeah.
It makes absolute no sense, in my opinion.
Actually, I don't think you can take any meat now that you say that. I don't think you can take it from internationally I don't think you can take meat from the US to Europe or vice versa, and you can't take it from Colombia.
But you see,
Yeah.
a year ago, Biden was in presidency, and there was maybe you remember, there was a crisis about the baby formula in the States.
Yeah, I remember
Abbott
that.
had a problem in one of their machinery, and they had to recall all that production, and suddenly the US had a lack of baby formula. There is a block from the US for baby formula from Europe, which is excellent and cheaper. Every time that I went to the States and I had to buy baby formula, smaller packages and double the price. So many times it's just politics. You don't need to fly more hours to fly your airplane. I'm sure that's Matt, but you need to comply with whatever bureaucrat negotiated, etc., etc. You see?
But yeah, there's even still things like when you even mentioned the formula. Um, the first time I was in Europe was probably 25, 30 years ago, and I noticed that in the United States we refrigerate our milk in the grocery stores, and we also refrigerate our eggs. And you go to Europe, or for that matter anywhere else in the world, it seems like you all you'll have a different process for pasteurizing your milk. And your milk lasts longer because of that. Your eggs last longer because you don't wash them. They're just, you let nature do its thing. And in the United States, we have to wash our eggs, which means that the moment you wash that coating, that natural coating off, now they have to be put in the refrigerator. So those are the things that, I think that sometimes the FDA is not our best friend in the U.S. So it's also, I think it's part of our our healthcare issues, our healthcare costs in the U.S. I think our biggest problem is lobbyists. Lobbyists. I I work with some European organizations, and there's one that there's some doctors at this one, and they despise they get frustrated at the pharmaceutical companies because most of those pharmaceutical companies are European based, and they're not allowed to do in Europe what they do in the U.S. And pricing and things like that, and they make more money from the U.S. And I think that's um, another reason why some of the I see some stupid regulations while I'm in Europe, but I'm like, okay, they didn't have anything to make laws about this time, so they just made some stuff up. But a lot of it makes sense too.
But funny enough, Spain, Spain is very good for testing drugs in humans. And I know this because of an American friend based in Madrid who works in this industry.
Okay.
Apparently, Spain is very, let's say, more open to doing tests of medicine, and a lot of the pharmaceuticals are have their branches for doing this in Spain. So as you can see, it can be, the differences can be so varied
Yeah.
depending on how granular you go.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I know a lot of people from the US, if you have money and you get cancer, you usually go outside the US to get treated. You go to Mexico, where a lot of doctors from the US have moved, so they're not stuck to those regulations, or they go to Europe. I hear actors all the time that, go to Germany or someplace for, a treatment that's not available. So, but yeah, I mean, it is definitely all over the place on, I guess you could pick and choose different things in life, and a different country is going to be ranked better than another. But yeah, the thing I noticed about Spain is just I don't know. I guess it's Spain, Italy, and Portugal. It's that whole south. Um, is that just the life is more slow, and I think that's probably what makes that quality better. Um,
Definitely. And I think there is one thing that is very, very important about Southern Europe, which is the possibility to build a support network, um, even at later in life. Okay, making friends, making connections, uh, being part of a community. I believe it is easier than in Northern Europe, for example. It is much easier to meet people, or meet people that are open to being part of your network, being in other words, being your friends.
yeah.
Being your friends, because one of the things, and you're a well-traveled person, you lived in many countries, 20 years going back and forth, Europe and South America and everywhere. Not everyone is like that. And also the years pass. The years pass, and it is not the same making friends when you are 18 or 20 than when you are 50, 60, 70. It's not the same. But Spain, it is, and even people comparing to Portugal, Spain, it is a great place for that. You will have community, you will have people in your situation, people who are open to being friends, and it's very important to be part of a community and building a strong support network when you live in a country where your family is not there, let's say.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and the thing is, for me, I I I find that there's always these little expat communities, and I think that if you're an American, you could easily find other Americans, or if you're British, you could find other British. But just meeting also locals, and I don't think it's even that. I think like even when when I've been in different countries, like even in Spain, you find lots of Germans, and so and I was told that was Ibiza or Mallorca, one of the two.
Mallorca.
They call it the 17th or 16th or 17th German state.
It is.
So
It is.
yeah, so um, yeah, and by the way, I did find myself on Ibiza. Gosh, it's probably been at least 10 years ago, and I felt so old. It's the first time I've ever felt old anywhere.
I never saw so many like 18 to 22-year-olds in one place in my life. And I mean, it was like, I felt like the island was like 80% that age group. And then, so, yeah, but that was an interesting experience. So, yeah, I enjoyed that. But yeah,
You see, this is I like from Spain that they are not pushy on their culture. People who come to live here. I am not from here. Of course, I am Spanish. I've been here 21 years, and I'm more Spanish than Argentine already.
Yep.
Call it that way. But I'm not, let's say, from the USA, or I'm culturally linked. But what I like about Spain is that they don't push you their culture. I like that Americans can be Americans. I like that the British can have their communities. I like the Germans, to be Germans, and they don't have to learn Spanish if they don't want to. You see? What I say is, if you want to learn Spanish, for example, it's not because you want to be seen as being part of integration. It's because your life will be better, simply because of that. You will have a better life if you communicate better and more effectively in Spain. But you don't have to. For example, when I live in Denmark, and I love Denmark, I love the country, but they're very pushy about their culture. And if you have been there, more than 1 year, and you are not doing an effort to learn Danish, they don't like it, and they make it clear. They make it clear, and it is a hard language, okay, that you won't speak outside of Denmark. Okay, just to give you an example, that was my feeling. Maybe it's not like that exactly, but that was my feeling. In Spain, you can be yourself, and there's no rush. Okay, and I like that because I also like to meet people from different places. Imagine, my wife is American. I have friends from all over the world that I met here in Spain, and I love that. I love that mix. So there's a lot of comments in social media, in the group, saying like, why don't you integrate? Why aren't you more part of a culture, etc. I don't see the point of that, honestly. I like that about Spain.
Okay. Well, I've taken up a good part of you're in your afternoon now. I honestly, it has been a pleasure talking with you. I've really enjoyed getting to know you, and so thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.